Welcome to another episode of the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast. If you're joining us live here on Facebook, we appreciate you, and you can send in the questions or comments that you have if you are wondering why Chad's wearing a hat or anything else like that, or why Nate's wearing a blue sweater, silly stuff, whatever it might be, or training questions, just throw them in there. We'll address them at the end of this, actually. So we'll be able to go through and cover those questions that you might have. Hopefully, also, we're using a new setup this week, new video, new audio as well. Hopefully it works well for everybody and better than previous weeks. So if you have any issues, let us know, and we'll go through and we'll try to change things as much as we can, perhaps live, but hopefully it's better for all of you. Are you guys ready to start the podcast proper?
Let's do this.
Indeed.
All right, let's do it. Welcome to the podcast. It's dedicated to making you a faster cyclist, the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad. I'm Coach Jonathan Lee with our head coach, Chad Zimmerman.
Hi, everybody.
And our CEO, Nate Pearson.
Hello.
And we are going to answer more of your cycling and triathlon related questions today. You can submit them at trainerroad.com/podcast. We'll come through those questions, answer as many as we can every week. Before we get into those questions, we have a few things to cover. Firstly, for anybody that's coming to Cyclocross Nationals, we mentioned this before, we'll be having an event the night before the pro race. That'll be Saturday evening before the pro race, and we'll be having it here at TrainerRoad HQ. So more details to come on that. Nate, do we want to talk about the job posting still?
Yep. Still hiring 3 web engineers, and actually we're going to also hire another app engineer. So on the app side, we use Xamarin, and if you're good at Xamarin Forms, iOS, Android, Mac, and PC, apply now at trainer.com/jobs. That's it. Cool.
Nice. Awesome. And then you also wanted to, something that we got sent. So for those that don't know, if you've been to like Target, you see like Everyman Jack products. I've seen them other places too, but I see them at Target all the time. Really not, they're like toiletries for men. Mm-hmm. And they sponsor a triathlon team. And Darren Mounts is actually the director of that team. And he sent over a really cool piece that Goo, the nutrition company, did a mini documentary on him, right?
Yeah. Just kind of like what a triathlete goes through to qualify for Kona. And that Everyman Jack team is probably the fastest non-pro team in the world for triathlon, I think.
Yeah.
Pretty fast guys.
Yeah.
It wasn't this year. Yeah. But the year before, I think that the majority, it was like over 80% of their team qualified for Kona, I think.
Yeah. That's pretty good.
That's really good.
And they're how big a team?
Geez. They're upwards of 20 guys, I think. So, and if we actually, not this year, but the year prior, when we were flying to Kona, there were a handful of them on the plane, and all of them just look like insane. Like everyone looks fit in Kona, and it's a great way to feel bad about yourself if you're there because everyone around you is fit and beautiful. But these guys were extremely fit, and they were like eating like nuts and berries while all of us were eating like our crackers and stuff.
They all brought their own food. You're right. Like on the plane, they like brought out Tupperware and like, here I go, eat my food.
Yeah.
But that's dedication, and you see that in this video. So it's, even if you're not a triathlete, I like it because it's inspirational. Like anything that makes me kind of like, oh yeah, I want to train more, I like to watch. Yeah. So it's called The Other Side of Fear. If you just Google that and probably do Goo or Everyman Jack or triathlon, it'll come up.
Yeah, it's an awesome thing. I would check it out for sure. Beyond that, Nate, we have a few things to cover with you. You've been racing, and the other day we did a tally.
Racing, I'm using air quotes.
we did a tally.
Well,
let's talk about Sacramento first because that leads into it.
That's good idea. Yeah, that's true.
Real quick, I just did a cross race in Sacramento, got smoked really bad.
Which category?
Bees.
Why did you get smoked?
Well, they're really good in the bees. That's one thing.
But what parts of aspect of performance did you fall short on?
It was a grass course, lots of turns. Okay. Lose a second every turn. It's really hard to stay competitive.
And really quick, the reason that you would lose a second on a turn is because of the technical prowess, perhaps, that other people might have over you.
Yeah.
Technique and all that stuff is something you're constantly working on.
Exactly. I got a really bad start. There's a really big field of like 25 people, and it was an extremely fast start. In that section on another lap where I didn't sprint, I hit 30.
Okay.
So I had flashbacks, and you kind of went from like paved road, and then there was a lip, or then we would kind of jump off and get air and land on like kind of grass with like holes in it. Yeah. And I just was like, no, I'm not sprinting that. But it also made kind of like, you get kind of stuck in a position, especially on this course because it was hard to pass. But you know, even if I was I started in the front, I would have fall back a lot.
Okay, yeah.
And then
what happened? So
yeah, so there's like a log that you gotta. One other thing before I get to that.
Okay.
I talked about adjusting my cleats to clip out faster.
Yeah.
Where I kind of had them angled so that I wouldn't get stuck in my cleats, which I was getting stuck on the Speedos, and we actually found out that was a problem with my shoes, not the cleats.
Yeah.
So I was doing that.
Let's cover that really quick because I'm sure people will ask about that. What we found is that we have the same shoes, but you have a larger shoe size. What size shoe?
46.
Okay, so 46, and we found that the tread on that shoe, the tread sticks down a little bit more than, and it's an S-Works shoe.
Slightly taller.
Yeah, slightly taller tread, and those shoes, they have a design, or those pedals like Speedos, the M-Force 8 ties are the ones that we're talking about, but their other ones are similar too. A lot of shoes will make it so that your tread is what like gives you lateral stability, so that basically like you clip in, but then tread is on the outside, and that sits on the pedal body. And like Crank Brothers do that. And the problem with that is once your shoes wear down, that it feels like you're really loose and standing on like a ballpoint pen. But in this case with Speedos, they actually make it so that the part of the cleat rests on the pedal body, and that's what makes it stable. But in your case, since the tread's longer, it's actually like making it so that it's hard to clip in, harder than normal, and then you can't really get out because your tread is pressing against that pedal body.
Yeah, I would get in a situation, not every time, where my foot would actually just get stuck.
Yeah.
And it's no fun when you're trying to unclip on the trail and you're stuck. So this was kind of in response to that too. But the problem I noticed is, although it's easier to clip out, it's way harder to clip in because your feet have to be in, there's less room to do that. Yeah. So I lost some time on that. And there's one section where you go over a log, and I ran the log during the race because in pre-race I had a problem with it. And there was a short run, or like it's kind of a steep hill, and I just flipped over the handlebars because I was trying to clip in with a lot of power. Yeah, and my foot slipped and went over, and then like six people, like I was the head of like a little group, like 6 people passed me, and that also takes. It hurt. It wasn't that bad.
Not
but
a confidence builder.
And it takes the gusto.
Yeah.
You know, totally. Have you guys ever got it where? These aren't excuses. I got smoked. Fast guys, right?
Yeah.
But in a race, do you ever get it where it's like the end of a big block where you don't have as much like fire in your belly?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's called fatigue.
Yeah, you're like, I was just racing. I was like, oh, I can't wait for rest day. Like during the race. And I usually don't have that mentality ever. And I was thinking like, did you just beat yourself? Like right then?
Yeah, you
know
did.
What I mean?
You
exactly.
did.
Yeah. And I was trying to get out of it. And
that's tricky though. Once you get into that, it's hard to pull yourself out.
Well, then I crashed, and then I was like, and 6 people passed me like, boom, 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 and I was like, oh.
That's right, yeah.
But anyways, the thing you want to talk about is before the race, there's a little log, and I was trying to practice to ride it. And in Cross Vegas, remember I tried to hop that curb, and I hopped it totally wrong.
Vividly.
So this time, thanks, Chad. This time, totally cleared the front wheel just fine. It's about the size of a curb. Hit the back wheel pretty hard, and that kind of like it knocked me out of my pedals. I hit it that hard. Well, I got back from the race the next day, and my rear tire's flat. And it turns out I had cracked my rim almost all the way through.
Bad crack.
Like, have you seen a crack this bad before?
Yeah, it's called a just completely tacoed and broken rim.
Yeah, okay.
Like, no, but that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, it's darn near. Like
through and through.
You raced on this, right?
Yeah, so I raced.
Didn't even know.
Yeah,
so it might have
kind of scared about that.
So it might have propagated through, like the race might have made it worse.
Yeah,
but it looks like one of your spokes pulled down through the rim, and it actually, in a lot of cases when that happens, you'll see that the crack goes longitudinally from one spoke hole to the next spoke hole. But in this case, it just cracked up toward the bead. It's scary looking. That's because that's
a 32 millimeter wheel too. So
there's a Roval CLX 32.
Yeah,
got a replacement coming. But it's a little scary, and it doesn't have, that also does not inspire confidence. Nope. And especially because on that race, there's a little downhill, and, I was hitting it hard. And there's that other spot where I was going, like I hit 30, where you then jump off something.
Thank goodness it was the rear wheel, not
the
front.
Exactly.
If the rear wheel fails, usually it's something that you can get away with, but
depending on skill.
And we're talking cross here. On road, nothing failing is ever good. But
anyways, I'm going to, 2 takeaways, get your cleats right.
Yeah.
Practice skills, or 3 takeaways, and then check your equipment.
Yeah.
So what does that bring your damage report to for the 2017 season?
It wasn't the best season.
So first, you crashed at Chico.
Yeah.
And that's when you broke your collarbone.
Broke his body.
Yes.
Yep.
So body.
That's some money.
And then S-Works Venge.
And that was the old S-Works Venge.
Yeah.
And we didn't find a crack in it, but I hit so hard and so fast.
Yeah, you were going like 30 miles an hour,
or
right?
32 or something. It was that to 0.
Yeah.
That's what my Garmin said. And that's what my body felt too. So I didn't trust it after that. And it was an old bike and I wanted a new disc brake. So I was like,
so it was kind of convenient.
Yeah.
And then you broke your Evade in that crash,
The
right?
helmet, yeah.
Yep.
And that's because that didn't crack either. But if you land on your head
and get a concussion,
it's garbage.
Yeah.
Get rid of the
garbage,
thing, man. Get rid of it. Yeah. You tore up your TT suit, the Evade TT suit.
It was the TTGC suit, and I just wore it in that race because I was like, I want every second. It's a $500 suit, right?
Yeah. Holy
and the
cow.
ER, it kind of got scraped up, and then in the ER they cut it off me.
Oh, yeah. And if it's scraped up, it's one thing, but when it's not scraped up, that kills me, man. Like I just want to, like I understand that I have limbs not where they should
They're
be,
so
but
quick with those scissors.
It couldn't. No,
Dive
they
right
asked,
in.
they asked me, and it was torn, but there was no way I could get. I would have worn it for like 4 months if not.
Fair enough. Yeah.
until it decayed on you.
Yeah.
Then at single track 6, you broke a Yeti 4.5.
Yeah.
You broke the top tube on that one.
And I think it was my knee, and you guys think it was. I don't know.
We're pretty sure it was not your knee.
It would take I would take a strong.
You guys
knee.
don't know how I got a scar on my knee from that hit. So.
And then now you broke a Roval CLX 32.
Yep.
Let's not even put dollar figures to this. That's a lot of stuff.
Hopefully 2018 will be better.
Chad, what have you broken this year?
I caught a pedal and I dinged one of the cleats or the mechanisms that hold the cleats.
Oh,
Noob.
terrible.
Yeah, so we're
Terrible
kind of
of you, Chad.
on the same page there.
Not remotely close.
No.
Cool. One other thing. So, well, first of all, we've mentioned this a few times. We have some exciting stuff coming for TrainerRoad, and if you go into your profile and go into Ride Sync, you can sync your TrainerRoad account with Garmin Connect and Strava. I recommend you do so. It's exciting stuff. The last thing we want to cover before we get into the questions. You brought up something. We always talk about consistency. We always talk about quality with your training, which makes you faster. And in the end, or not necessarily which makes you faster, but how each of those components make you faster. And in this case, we figured, why are we not just combining those two? Consistent quality.
That's what it is, right? And they always talk about, like, in basketball, like perfect practice when you do free throws. Not just practice.
Yeah, it's not practice that makes perfect. It's perfect practice that makes perfect.
Same with cycling. It's consistent quality. And that's where, because you could be consistent and you just go out and ride with your friends a bunch, but you don't get to that next level. Or you could have quality session once a week. That's different too. Consistent quality all throughout your training.
Yeah, then when you're
faster.
talking 3 consistent quality sessions or more, or something else like that, then that's where, and I know it makes sense, but in reality, when it comes to executing on that, we're pretty bad at it, us humans, you know what I mean? Like, we think, I don't know if we want to do that interval set today. Like, it's a little harder, so.
Good thing to just keep in mind is consistent quality. And in eating too, consistent quality.
It goes for most things, really.
Yeah. Your job.
Yeah, totally. Good point.
Podcasts.
Yeah, yes, every week.
Step it up, guys. Let's do it.
We're trying. Rob, let's get into Robin's question then. He says, hi team, firstly, hats off to TrainerRoad. As more and more training systems become available, TrainerRoad remains, in my opinion, the go-to training resource for anyone serious about their cycling. That's it, man. He gets it. It's good. He says, my question relates to power to weight ratio and its correlation to theoretical race categories. We covered this a couple episodes back. We had a few people send in questions about this. We thought this was like a good opportunity. So basically, just to cover really quick, we covered Coggin's power chart, where he's basically taken riders across a wide array of disciplines that he has here. And he's brought in more or less their power to weight ratios and tried to assimilate that to, or find an average, so to speak, for an ability of a cyclist. He's quantified that ability with category 5 through 1 and those sort of things. So we covered that. And while it is, once again, this is data that's generally representative, there are certainly outliers to this. So now the question, he says, I've never raced in any format. However, with a watt kg, which is akin to power to weight ratio of 4.2, that's 4.2 watts per kilogram of his weight, for those who don't understand that. So he says the theoretical information available would suggest that I could be racing in a relatively high category. Right, yeah, if you just went off that.
Yeah, where'd that put him? Do we remember for FTP? Is
that would put him at Cat 2 area.
Low Cat 2, high Cat 3.
Yeah.
Yep, yeah. So he says, sounds good. However, my issue is that with a weight of 52 kilograms, it's about 114 pounds. My FTP is only around 220 watts. I imagine I would be eaten alive in any real-world race situation with such a low output, unless the race is a 3-hour-long constant climb. I certainly wouldn't be able to cut it in a crit, says he. So let's say I want to enter road racing. Even then, I would struggle on long flat poles against riders with a similar watt kg, but much greater FTP. And that's one thing we should cover is the fact that like you might have the same power to weight ratio as somebody that's really small and you might be really big. But the fact is that you would have a higher threshold than that person. But in certain circumstances, that may mean that you have a disadvantage or that may mean that you have an advantage, right? So he says, I guess the only way to find out is to try it out to see how I compare in the real world. However, it does seem to suggest that the correlation between watt kg and race category isn't that relevant, or am I misunderstanding something? It would be physically impossible for me to elevate my FTP much more. I'm just too small. Plus, at 50 years old, I know performance is on the decline anyway. Which, by the way, 4.2 watts per kilogram at 50 years old is solid, man. Yeah. That's solid. I had thought about competing in short hill climb events. However, these are normally so short that the heavier riders with big power will still destroy me. I guess I need to move to the Alps and try to find races that start at the bottom and finish at the top. More than an hour of climbing to profit from my low weight, low power, if only.
No, Robin.
I mean, moving to the Alps sounds great, but...
And just before we get into this, the last one... Just because if it's a short hill climb, the heavier riders with bigger power don't have an advantage over you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that people hear short, hard climbs, like you think of like certain races in the classics where it might be a really short little climbs. A big rider, if he has momentum coming into that, he can still get over it okay. But really, when that climb lasts for, we're talking 2 minutes and longer than that, it really starts to slow them down. We have a good example, just a local road race we do all the time. We call it the Wall. It usually ends up being about a 3 to 5 minute climb for most people. And that climb is one where the big guys always get to the front. They climb as hard as they can. And they think in their minds that like, I can still get over it just fine, but they do end up losing a lot on that climb because, it's over a minute to 2 minutes long and that weight starts to hit them.
People explode.
So I'm going to rephrase this question. Can somebody who's small with a 220 watt threshold race well at the 4.2 watts per kilo?
Absolutely.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of options here. I mean, you are built like a pure climber. That doesn't mean you have to pursue just pure climbing races. I do think in terms of the criterium racing, unless you've got a mad punch, you can push out the 20, 30 second power, 10 second power really well, then criteriums may not be your best fit, but I wouldn't say don't try it. I mean, still get out there and see how it goes. You can ride smartly. You can hide and play your cards such that you exploit the strengths that you have, which, your strength to weight ratio is not bad. You're a small rider, which means you're aerodynamic. So should you get away by yourself, that's a benefit.
Yeah.
In a criterium, there's a few things with your small rider. One, you're going to accelerate much easier than someone who's 190 pounds.
Yep.
So all those surges aren't going to be as bad.
Corner.
When you sit in the group and you sit behind someone like Chad and I and you find us, it'll be like there's freewheeling, totally.
And you also flip that around.
Yes.
If there's another guy behind you and he's a bigger guy, or if there's a guy that you're particularly worried about, try to slot yourself in the rotation so that you're the one in front of him because he's never going to get a good break from the wind.
Let's say you can accelerate and you're on a break with me. And I've done this with other riders that are smaller, and I'm trying to draft off you. It feels like there is no benefit. And if you get really small and like bunch up, you can really put the hurt on me. We talked about this. It's like the opposite of what we talked about last week.
Yep.
That's a huge advantage there.
And you're doing your job. You're in front of him. You're just not really giving him any drafting benefit.
You have no requirement to sit up or make yourself bigger.
No, certainly
not at all. So it's an advantage that you have. And I just wanted to, sorry if I'm taking this off track, but with criterium racing especially, I find criterium racing in many respects to be the most strategic. Not necessarily, but because it's so concentrated.
Oh yeah, and there's short races too, so tactics play pretty heavily.
Yeah, and I really find like Dave Christensen is a good example. He's our videographer and or our filmmaker, I should say. He's an incredible cyclist, races UCI Pro races all around. He's a small guy, relatively speaking, and the way he wins criteriums, he has a high FTP and he has low weight. But the way he really wins criteriums is he is extremely clever and he is a savvy racer. Or I shouldn't say he usually doesn't like to sprint for the win, but he's the type of guy that'll solo for it. But he's really tough to beat because he is very good at reading a race. And I think that if you shy away from racing criteriums because they don't necessarily favor your strengths, you could be missing out on lessons that'll help you across the board.
And this is criteriums. So, bad criteriums. Maybe you do one or you don't. You just, for whatever reason, it's not your preference. So a rider with your size and power, is obviously well suited to climbing. Anything that favors strength to weight and goes uphill is totally going to suit you. And just because it doesn't mean you have to be climbing the entire time. I mean, look at the best climbers in the world. They have teams to support them. And even if you don't have a team built around you, once again, you play the tactics. You sit in, you find ways to hide until you get to those pivotal moments, the climbs, and then you unleash. I mean, you could do some damage.
I think this is like, for if he's 50 with 4.2 watts per kilo.
That's good.
There's not going to be many people that are at that same level.
Oh, certainly. No.
So in a road race, you can sit in for 2 hours.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Pretty much doing like 80 watts.
Yep.
And then every hill climb,
Show your face then.
you push the pace, and everyone else who's been sitting in the wind is going to get so much more tired.
Yeah, race strategically.
Yeah,
That's all.
Yeah, exactly. You can. I think it's an advantage.
And even at 50, is that what we're talking? Yeah, even at 50 years of age, don't give up on the fact that you can improve your FTP. You can bring it up another, who knows? Maybe you've topped out, but most people, and I mean most people, have not met their genetic potentials.
Yeah, that's true. I think that there's always, and it may, let's say theoretically you've topped out on the training volume you can sustain and you're doing the exact right type of training, everything else, there are still other aspects in life that you can do to help out.
And that means based on those limitations, you've topped out. So,
Exactly.
say circumstances change and you find another couple hours a week to train, who knows? That might bring you up another, 0.1, 0.2 watts per kg.
TTs, there'll be like big people who are really good at TTs, medium people are really good at TTs, even small people who are really good at time trials.
Yes.
Like, I think some of the smaller guys aren't better at time trials because they put it in their head. Like they never ride their TT bike and they just want to climb.
Well, that's like me, right? Like I think I'm a poor time trialist, and I think that it's something that I've just built up in my head, right?
And how often do you train for TTs?
Never.
Never.
I've seen some really impressive time trials put in by people who were 130 pounds ish, and I know we're talking closer to 115 here, but still, just don't make these assumptions. Go out and see what you can actually do.
Absolutely. I think a principle with this too that everyone should consider, no matter if you're light or you're heavy or anything else, is don't necessarily just shy away from the races that favor your strengths. If you look at the races that highlight your weaknesses or anything else like that, it's a good opportunity for you to learn something that can then help you be an even better racer. So that's how I feel with time trialing coming up. Me focusing on time trials is something I've never done before, and I consider it a weakness. Who knows if it actually is? And I think that it's going to be something that'll really help me become a better racer, period.
Yeah.
So it's, even though you may just want to find long sustained climbs, and do that because it could be fun because you could really wreck some shop on some people here. But, if you find the other races too.
And so I'm on the other side of it, being a heavier person, and don't pigeonhole yourself into just certain like aspects. I can only do from you, I can only do a flat course. I can only do a crit. I can only do a rolling course. It's so much fun to do these mountain bike races where I climb for an hour and then I'm horrible at descending and I descend for an hour, right?
Yeah.
Like it's because it takes me as long to descend as it does to climb.
You've been a good example of that because mountain biking wasn't a comfort zone thing, and it was something that in all, like if you thought through it logically, it wasn't something that you would be naturally, inclined to excel at.
It would be the worst thing I'd be good at. I mean, right? Maybe pure downhill I'd be worse at, but
I'm sure it's helped you be a better rider across the board though.
And it's been so much fun.
Yeah.
Right? So
that's the key.
I'm not a pro racer.
Yep,
and
good point.
I don't need to win every race.
Yeah, if any of this stuff's interesting to you, don't concern yourself in advance of what the results might be. Go out there and try it. See how fun it is for you.
And maybe I never beat someone who's 140 pounds, who's has a high VO2 max and great hair. Like it just won't. It just won't happen on a mountain bike. And you did motocross and stuff. Like
Chad's VO2
background.
max isn't that high. I don't know what you're talking about.
No VO2 max, no hair. Sorry, Chad.
That's how it works.
Just joking.
Science.
You have the biggest muscles.
So let's get
the best legs.
True story. Let's get into Charlie. He says, "Hey guys, love the show. Been listening for about a year now and really enjoy it. I'm a 40-year-old father of 3, but still in pretty good shape. I've been active duty military for 17 years. Thank you for that, Charlie. I mostly train just to stay fit and smoke the young guys in PT. I was a scholarship runner in college and have done a few Olympic Xterra tries over the years, but never got seriously into triathlon because of high entry fees.
They are expensive.
Can we cover that really quick? Because I don't know if road cyclists fully get how expensive it is.
Just how much these people pay.
Road racers complain when it's like $20-$30. And like Lake Tahoe was like $800.
Yeah, like let's hear this. Like I have to buy a 1-day license. It's like $29 or something from USAC, and cyclists lose their minds.
I know.
Lose their minds.
I hear other races not doing USAC because it's going to be like $5 more per race.
Yeah.
And as a triathlete, I'm like, I don't understand that.
And granted, we also don't want to be insensitive. Like, we understand, like, restrictions and budget and everything else. We totally get that. But we're just talking about comparing road cycling to triathlon.
Yeah.
It's hundreds of dollars.
Yeah. When you're in the triathlete model and you're used to races, calling a sprint race may cost $120.
Yeah.
Right. And then up from that, halves are
that's a road stage race, $120.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, triathlon's expensive.
It is.
Yeah.
No
it
lie.
is very expensive.
Mm-hmm. It is. So how much do people pay for what is the most you paid for a triathlon?
I think Lake Tahoe, I think it was like $750 or something.
Dear me.
But you have to do it too with that. It was like race 1 year before the race, you have to sign up.
Because it fills up so fast.
And then you have to get the lodging. They always do like, minimums, and it's expensive. And
so next time you roadies give a triathlete a pain, or I should say grief about being so hyper-focused on their training and really focused on this event and everything else, remember, they shelled out a ton of cash.
Financial incentive at work there.
Yeah.
A year ahead of time. Yeah, it's a big deal, man. So he says, last year I used TrainerRoad to prep for my first full road cycling season. I had a lot of fun and was planning on doing the same thing this year, but sticking with the structured training, even when the weather is calling me outside over the summer. However, I was just offered a free entry into the main Ironman 70.3 event in August, so I'm going to use that as my A race this year. I'd also like to race the early season crit series, though. I know these are competing goals, so I'm wondering if doing a weekly B race crit in April and May will severely throw off my training for a long triathlon in August. And should I switch plans after the crits are over? Cheers, Charlie. So if I could sum it up really quick, he's basically just asking, can a triathlete race crits, right? And then we'll get into the timeline and everything else. But because you don't usually see a triathlete in a criterium.
Yeah, and we're talking a half distance triathlete, so not a UCI or a sprint triathlete. Mm-hmm. But certainly, there's no reason why not, especially considering the gap between your criterium season and your 70.3. And on top of it all, it doesn't sound like you are a tried and true lifelong triathlete anyway. So it sounds like your goals are a little bit. Now you have this goal, but you're not locked into it with the way someone who is a dedicated triathlete would be. So why not just enjoy it? Why not have fun with this?
And even if he was a dedicated triathlete, still, the crossing disciplines, as we talked about, is so much fun.
It's all aerobic fitness anyway. If you're aerobically fit for one thing, you can tailor that to be aerobically fit for another. It always comes down to aerobic fitness. So just because you're using some anaerobic efforts within the course of these races and maybe training as such, doesn't mean it's going to hamper your training for something like a 70.3.
Yeah. Yeah. Think of it like a suspension bridge in between those anaerobic efforts, the really high intensity ones, those cables that kind of connect in between. You're spending a lot of time working on that aerobic fitness as well. It's not just like
by far.
Yep. It's not like you're just criterium is not just an anaerobic effort. It's predominantly aerobic. So,
and I think I like this question because a lot of people think that if I'm a steady state athlete and I do something punchy, like it's going to then suddenly destroy my steady state athlete part. Or if I'm in base season or I'm doing sweet spot base and there's like
it's going to be disruptive somehow.
Can't break the ceiling.
Yeah, there's like a winter crit or something. And if you go above it, then I get overtrained suddenly and I just can't do anything.
No, not at all.
I would say too, as a former triathlete, doing the crits, 1, super fun. 2, it'll make you better handling. And he's an Xterra athlete, so maybe he has great handling already. But for in general, the tactic side of it, it can actually push you a little bit harder because you're with real road racers.
Yes.
Right, than normal. Road racers in general are faster than triathletes in general, although we all know
it's what any triathlete should do. You swim with the best swimmers, you ride bikes with the best bike racers, and you run with the fastest runners.
And I've found criteriums can be scary at first for people that are either new to riding or hesitant with bike handling, all that stuff. But I've personally found more benefit from riding in a criterium. And you can find the spot that you're comfortable and find local races that are safe and everything else. But I feel like it's such a concentrated mix of learning how to ride well with others and bike handling. And it's a good way also, I think a lot of people, they may not understand the limits of turning and traction and feel really uncomfortable. Let's just say their limits right here and they live the whole time down here. And I think that the cool part about a criterium is since there are so many corners, and the pack, hopefully the whole entire pack isn't going too fast and they'll all crash. In most cases, they're going to go the speed that you can maintain through those corners. So it's really good to familiarize yourself with maybe a higher level that still isn't over your limits.
And it sounds like you're pretty early in your competitive career here. Regardless of what your age is, you're new to racing. You're new to road racing. Now you're new to triathlon. Now you're going to be new to criteriums. You're doing exactly what I'd recommend doing. Try a little bit of everything. See what you like the most.
And he says it's going to be a B race. So we talked about this last week, but you could rearrange your schedule where maybe a day off is right before the crit, or the crit is, if you start your week on Tuesday, you got a day of rest and it's on Thursday, something like that. I wouldn't be taking, 4 days off or a taper all the time for these crits because you do have a big event coming up at 70.3, but just replacing a workout, one of your higher VO2 max or I don't know, it depends on what phase of training you're in, but you could just replace a workout with it. After this question, I have a question for you.
Okay.
So let's remember that.
Yeah, and can I add one last thing that I wanted to add on this, and then we can go to you, Chad, if you have anything else on this. But I think that this is a great opportunity. I know, for example, Åsa Lundström, she's a professional triathlete. Liz Lyles, another professional triathlete, Åsa was living in this region for a while. So both of them, they rode with road riders the majority of the time when they were riding outside, and it really helps them. And Liz constantly asks, hey, can you join me on this ride? She always wants to do that. I think a lot of the triathlete world lives separate from the road cycling world a lot of the time.
Yeah.
It could be a great opportunity for you to meet other cyclists that you could go out with and then build just valuable friendships with. But then on top of that too, you could really benefit each other in terms of training.
Yeah, we had those Aussie guys that used to come here every year, excuse me, they would spend basically the Australian winters over here, our summers, and do bike races upon bike races. And they were really good at the bike races. And then they, of course, finish the race, get off and go do a run right afterwards, which would freak all of us out. But then they'd head back to Australia for their competitive season, and they were top level. They're extremely good.
Yeah. Go ahead, Nate.
So you brought up something really good where you talked about your tire traction is at, let's say it's at a 10, level 10 of a building. But you're only riding to, let's say I'm only riding to like a level 3 or 4 to my traction. And I think I've been making a mistake in like cross racing. I just moved from a cross boss to a cross wolf being like more...
It's like a mud tire. So it's got taller, more angled knobs with more clearance in between. Less knobs overall, and they're more angular to try to shed mud.
And not just mud, but they call it like it's a gnarlier, grippier. You have loose stuff, wet grass. Like you're gonna get some more grip. And I was thinking in my mind, these tires will make me go through those corners that I'm losing time faster. But if I'm not pushing,
doesn't really matter.
If I never hit the limit of my tire. Grippier tire is just going to slow me down when it's in a straight line.
Yeah, you haven't even challenged the limits of the less grippy tires.
Exactly. Right? And I think a lot of people, at least I think on the road side, they don't even worry about this kind of stuff because you don't want to mess with it.
Don't put tread on there.
But in cross and mountain bike, I mean, if you're never even coming loose at all, why am I getting a beefier tire to never come loose still?
And I'd actually argue that tire is a worse cornering tire than your current ones. And the reason
because of the gap in the knobs.
Yep. Less knobs, taller knobs, angled knobs rather than more square knobs. So what happens is that you get into a situation where you're really stressing those knobs, and those knobs can fold easier. They're taller, there's less of them, there's less support. So you get a less confident feeling in the tire. In most cases, you'll see if you really want a confident cornering tire, you want one that usually has a small amount of separation between top knobs and the side knobs. And those side knobs, the ones on the shoulder, there shouldn't be a lot of gap in between them. It should almost be like a consistent, very small gaps in between those tread, and they should be pronounced. They don't have to stick up really high, but they just have to be pronounced. The other thing you want to look for on those shoulder knobs is that instead of them flaring outward and being skinny, it'd be good to see instead of flaring out for them to kind of come straight down in straight lines to the side of the tire, and that means it's a more supportive side knob. And what that does is that little gap before you hit those shoulder knobs kind of helps you drop into those knobs and really grab all of the side knob. So it's kind of like it locks you in on a rail.
I've never felt that. So I'm thinking that like I never lean the bike enough to even those knobs are like clean the whole race.
Untouched.
You know what I mean? Yeah, untouched.
Yeah.
So what I'm thinking, I should just go file tread with some side knobs in case I like get an off camber section or I do happen to lean the bike.
Yeah, within reason. I really do think like the tire you were using, the Cross Boss, I think that's a great tire for
me.
Yeah, for control because it does have substantial side knobs on it. The Riddler, I guess, would be another option, and that one is much more of a file. It's not file tread, but it's got really small knobs in the center, darn near file tread, and then it's got some bigger shoulder knobs. Either one would be good, but I found that I feel more confident, at least on the Crossboss. I feel locked in.
The Schwabe has like a all-rounder one, and they have
the G1. I think it's called. It's got like little round ones.
Yeah, there's a new one. I think it's a little bit different. The knobs are just in a different like pattern.
Okay.
They have a file tread one, an all-rounder, and a mud tire. I was going to use the all-rounder for nationals, the non-championship.
Probably a good idea.
Yeah,
unless it's muddy.
Unless it's muddy, yeah, because this is a little bit of a crazier course, I think.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to try the file tread on grass.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Probably that's too much about me, but I thought it was a good takeaway because of the tires of being able to, you're not pushing the traction. Why am I getting more traction tires?
That's a good question.
Yeah. Last thing I want to add on. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to step back to Charlie's question.
Okay.
And say that the one thing we didn't touch on is that you can make your criteriums very specific, or more specific to triathlon or steady state efforts. And Nate's a perfect example of this. When he raced the B series or B crits, he would do exactly this: get off the front, dangle out there as long as he could, maybe stick it, maybe not, but either way, he would repeat those efforts, those steady state efforts.
What do you mean maybe?
I honestly don't know. I mean, I didn't watch it that closely.
You can be a real thorn in the side to a group in a criterium if you're the type of racer that just can hold steady at a level that's challenging for the rest of the field.
You could almost go through an entire race without ever really putting in a hard punch. If you ride the turns right, if you draft properly, you could save it all for that single move where you basically time trial off the front.
One sign that I would say that's not a good thing to do is if you find yourself at the front and then there are moves going constantly with you being at that pace at the front. If that's the case, sure, you might be getting the objective of your workout,
You're just making
which is
it
just
your
fine.
workout. You're not really racing.
Right. But at that time, if the pack's pace is roughly what your sustained pace is, and they can attack on top of that repeatedly, then, it's fine if that's the goal of your workout. But if you're trying to get like a good result, then chances are you should try to pick your battles a little better.
Race tactics are different in different levels, but in the local race here, probably in the B's and the C's, what happens is there'll be preems. So there'll be a lap where someone will win like a free pizza, right? And
go nuts for free pizza.
Preems.
What happens is like 6 or 7 people sprint really hard. The rest of the pack just kind of rolls up. And then once those people are done sprinting across the line, they kind of sit up and they're totally gassed, right? Then they get back in. I would say as a triathlete, what you do is when that preem comes up, you do a little attack, but you're not sprinting. You're holding a pace that you think you're going to go over the line and you're going to hold it now for like 30 minutes. So you get that separation. And when everyone sits up, you just keep going. That's different in the A races. That doesn't happen. Everyone doesn't sprint and just sit up every time and wait.
Typically, no.
In fact, usually at least what I think when the preem lap goes, if I'm not going for that preem, then I'm set to attack and pick up the pace right after that. Because I want to make the other people that tried to attack like that, I want to make them pay for that.
And
right?
that's smarter, right?
Got to punish them.
Yep, exactly right.
And I think that happens is like maybe people, they have, at least in Reno, it's like a high confidence level and more like durable fitness, where I see in the lower level ones, everyone's kind of like they're either holding out for a sprint or they have like they really, really want to keep their fitness like bottled up until a certain time. You know what I mean? Like even if when I would go off the front, people wouldn't work together to chase me because they're like, well, if I work, I'm not going to be able to sprint later.
Yeah, they play a little too cautiously for my liking.
Yeah, a little too cautious maybe. And I haven't raced the Bs in a few years now, so it could be totally different, but this was back in like 2009, 2010.
Lower category racers, we've talked about this before, but the stages that stick in our mind from the Tour de France in most cases are like sprint stages or like close finishes, that sort of a thing. Yeah. So in lower categories, you see a lot of the time they're shooting for that photo finish type of a thing. I'm going to sprint at the end and I'm going to make it, but in all reality, that can be a tricky
thing. A long time to wait for one sprint.
I know. I remember doing one of the A races and immediately there were attacks.
Yeah.
And they didn't always stick, but it was like, whoa.
Yeah. First lap flyers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Welcome to the jungle. So from Callum, the next question says, "Hi, TrainerRoad. Thanks again for a fantastic podcast. Highlight of my Monday, listening to you on the drive to work. I recently switched to an Elite Volano direct drive fluid trainer and from a more basic Elite mag wheel trainer. So the quick differences between, if those people are wondering, a fluid trainer usually has like an impeller and it's inside a little housing and it has fluid inside. So what gives it resistance is that impeller has to move through the fluid. Whereas a mag trainer usually has a magnet that moves closer or further away from a magnetically active flywheel, right? So that's how those two things provide resistance. And usually fluid trainers, or I shouldn't say usually, but the best mag trainer compared to the best fluid trainer, like the Kinetic Road machine is a really good fluid trainer in terms of feel, and it's pretty hard to get that feel where it feels easy to pedal in the beginning, then it gets tougher with a mag trainer. They're usually more linear.
I'll be more
Usually.
blunt. Fluid trainers are better than mag trainers.
Yeah.
Mag trainers are less expensive, but for feel, fluid all the way.
Yeah, and a stabler power curve. Or
Yep.
Yeah.
a curvier curve.
Yeah, it's
curvier
what
curve,
happens is on a mag one, it's a straight line, the slope.
Yep.
So as you put out more wattage, it's the same, and that's why they have to put it in different levels, because like you actually have to like click this little dial to move the magnet to be able to get like you might have to click it different to hit like a really high interval or something like that.
Yeah.
Unless sometimes you can find a sweet spot where you can do all your training in one level. Fluid trainer though, because it's as you spin that. Would you say impeller?
Yeah.
That's a cool word.
Yeah.
Impeller. I would have called it something else.
I learned something
Yeah,
today.
I call it like a fan or
go.
something. But as that spins, the resistance, it's like exponential. And it's kind of like riding outside.
Yeah.
So you don't have to change anything and you can get a whole range. wide range of-
Similar to the physiological tolls on the body. Same idea.
And that's why, and they tune it, right? So Kirk Kinetic, they put just the right amount of fluid in there
Yes.
so that you can do 20 watts up to, 1,400 watts.
And their fluid is for, I don't know why this is unique to them, but thermo-resistant.
Yeah,
Yes.
and other people are doing that
Is
now
it?
too.
Okay.
Yeah, it was unique like in 2008, but other
okay.
people are doing that now too.
That's good to see. And the last thing I would say on magnetic rollers, though, or on magnetic trainers, the set of rollers that I have are magnetic. They have 3 resistance levels. I haven't found another set of rollers that offers good resistance, to be frank. Like none of them do. They basically don't offer enough, or if you put the magnet really close, then it feels like you're constantly churning through mud. But with quick motion rollers by Elite, the ones that I use, it feels great. It feels like a fluid trainer. That said, in a 50-11, so that's my biggest gearing combo on my road bike, at a 50, and yes, I ride a compact proudly, but a 50-11, I'm sitting at, darn near 500 watts at about 100 RPM, 110 RPM.
Is that enough for you?
Which is
Barely.
it's enough for the majority of workouts, right? Like, I mean, really the majority. It's
yeah.
going to be rare. And if you shift up a bunch and really put, some effort into it, you can get up to 800, 900 watts. So, and for periodically, right? So, though that's one example where I think that maybe the fact that they're rollers allows it to be better, but it's rare, very rare.
The one other thing that mag trainers have over a fluid trainer is that they're quiet. Because things aren't usually touching, so it's just the bearings and the actual trainer. So if you're in an apartment or something, that might be.
Quiet, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's a good setup. So he says the mag trainer had served me well for over 5 years, but the drum was starting to wear. That's what his wheel presses against. And when I increased the resistance level, the wheel would slip. Hence, I decided it was time for an upgrade. However, since switching to the fluid trainer, I'm now almost struggling to keep the trainer turning over. In the recovery parts of the workouts, those are the valleys in between the work parts, he says at about 50% FTP in my lowest gear, he says a 38.25, at around 90 RPM, I'm still well above the prescribed power. Is this normal for a fluid trainer? I think we could all probably say it's not normal.
No, we talked about, they tune it so that someone who's a very beginner
Pretty road realistic.
Yeah, and if you're in a recovery valley, should be.
Yes.
Yeah.
Easy gear, easy work.
He says, I'm barely getting into the 38 to 14 tooth gear, even on the highest power. While I'm managing to keep the cadence and power as prescribed in the workout, it just all feels a bit labored compared to my previous trainer. And I totally get that. That's a frustrating feeling when you have that. He says, on my previous trainer, I would be spinning comfortably in the big ring around 90 to 100 RPM for all the prescribed resistances, only meeting a problem when I tried to step up the resistance for low cadence workouts. My FTP is 240 watts. I'm around 3.5 watts per kilogram, and that's important that he shared that part there. So while not huge, I'm pretty happy with it as a time-crunched athlete. He mentions that he's using a Stages power meter, so that has remained consistent between the two trainers. Any advice gratefully received.
Yeah, so he's right, kind of, if we did a histogram of riders, 240 watts, I think is very, very common for like trained riders, right?
For trained riders, it's fast. It's a good rider.
Yep. 3.5 watts, solid rider. I would say we have a whole bunch of ideas. One thing can be, and I've seen this ever in a lot of trainers, is when you switch from one trainer to another trainer and the inertial load is different, it can take a while to get used to that, and it can feel really bad. Like I even noticed it. So I ride a Hammer, and the Hammer has a gigantic flywheel.
Cyclops hammer,
Yep. And it's kind of like the Wahoo Kicker, but it's their version of it, wheel-off trainer. I can spin it up, get off my trainer, go to the bathroom, come back, and it's still spinning.
Yeah, I noticed the same thing.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I like it.
But even inside of that, if I'm doing an erg mode and I'm in like my biggest gear versus my smallest gear, it feels a lot harder in the smallest gear. And we've talked about this a lot. So with you, there might be with where the power curve is and stuff, like this could be a really high resistance fluid trainer. I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with this one.
Yeah.
But just being in that smaller gear could be a little bit harder.
Yeah, a little bit harder though.
Yeah. Well, not all trainers.
Go ahead.
Yeah, not all trainers are made alike. We'd be remiss to say that, a mag trainer is a mag trainer, a fluid trainer is a fluid trainer, and a smart trainer is a smart trainer. As you pointed out, they're all different. And that's why even, when we make like recommendations, if somebody asks, me personally, and I make recommendations, I don't just say, get a mag trainer, get a fluid trainer. I usually have a specific one. So my father has, it's like a no-name trainer. I can't remember the brand of it, but it's a fluid trainer, and their resistance floor is really high. And that floor, what we're talking about there, is basically like the minimal amount of resistance that it can apply. And it's really high. So some of them are higher. I would assume that's either too much fluid or the impeller is sized strangely for the body, something like that. And depending on the fluid inside, this could change when it gets hot and cold. But this almost sounds like let's just assume that it isn't that your trainer's resistance is just very strange compared to the other. There are some things that you can check to make sure that they aren't affecting it. Like I'm thinking tire pressure.
Well, so this one I looked it up. Mm-hmm. So we're going to be wrong on a few stages. One, it has a 3 kilogram flywheel, big flywheel.
Big.
This one is a direct drive.
Okay.
So there's no tire pressure.
Okay. There we are. Takes that out.
I'm almost thinking that this could be a manufacturer defect.
It could.
Because I have ridden, now that I look at it, I've ridden this trainer, and this trainer feels fantastic.
Yeah.
And I've ridden this at Interbike, and I would contact them because that is kind of weird to be able to, if you're doing 250 watts in your smallest gear.
Calibration?
There's no calibration. It's just, just power meter with it.
So let's cover if somebody doesn't have, and that one looks like a dirt bike motor, doesn't it?
It's actually, you know what, Chad? It does have this
does broadcast power.
It does. So it could be calibration on this.
He's using a Stages power meter. Let's remember.
Oh, he is. Okay.
So in this case,
power match. I mean, does it?
That won't have anything to do with it. It's not a smart trainer.
Not a smart trainer.
He's just picking up the Stages power and riding a fluid trainer.
I assume that in this case, it's probably something like a manufacturer's defect. But for those that may be in the same situation that may not have that, let's cover the different things that could be affecting this, that basically make it so that you feel like your trainer isn't easy enough to pedal.
Not a direct drive trainer. Tire in contact with something.
Yep. Let's talk about those ones. First thing I can think of is tire pressure. If you're running a super high or super low tire pressure, that can make things a lot harder to pedal.
Yep.
If you have that drum tightened down way too much, so it's basically giving you a flat tire, like pressing in, that can also make things tough.
Quality of the tire.
It's
deteriorated to the point that it's impacting the ride quality or the contact surface. Yeah,
tires can kind of get old and rotted or stiff. That can affect it.
Too, if you have a CompuTrainer, and Chad's very familiar with this. They're out of business now, but they used to heat up so much on that drum.
Blow tires.
It blow tires. It would delaminate it. Like I actually would take it off and I could see the threads on my tire.
Yeah, and I'd see little bubbles on people's tires at times from the heat. Yeah. Yeah, so that could be that.
Possibility.
Yeah. I've seen people also have their bike askew. I'm sure you saw that.
Canted a little bit. If it's just slightly cockeyed, it makes quite a big difference.
Yep. Yeah, that could affect it. So I would look at all of those options and then also look through, and this seems, this may seem silly to some folks, but it's worth checking out, especially if you leave your bike on the trainer for a while. Check out your bottom bracket bearings. Check out the bearings on your pedals, and then check out your drivetrain and make sure everything is just cleaned up. If it's super gummed up, you'd be surprised you could be losing as much as 20 watts.
And it is an issue that needs to be resolved because recovery has to feel like recovery. It will come at the expense of the quality of that workout.
Yeah.
So what I would do to contact Elite is I would ride in different combos and let them know the speed reported from Elite, from the trainer, from the Volano Smart B that you're riding. So you say at this speed, this is how many watts is coming out, and kind of give them a few data points. And they might even have like a brochure, some of them do, that say what it should be. And then if you're off by like 100 watts, there's some bearing or fluid or something's off in that, right? And you should be able to exchange it.
Yeah.
But if you're right in line, if you're 10, 20 watts off, that's not. That's just probably difference in manufacturing or something, or even your power meter.
Yeah, that's what I would recommend. Chad, I guess let's say that you can't resolve this situation for one reason or another. Like a lot of people have a very low FTP, and in that case, they the ceiling or the floor of their trainer is just not low enough, could they backpedal?
Yeah, the fallback's always the same, and it's back pedal. It's just no load pedaling. So if it's too much work for you to actually feel recovered and ready for the next interval, then just spin backwards. There's nothing wrong with it. You're keeping your muscles active. You're still circulating blood. You're still doing most of what we're after with a recovery valley anyway. So don't sweat it. Just spin backwards.
And there's no shame in a low FTP.
No,
I know. I
All
think
relative.
my wife.
We were just talking about with the 114 pound rider.
My wife, her first FTP test, I think she was 70, something like that.
Yeah.
Now she's got it up to like 190, like through
Jeez.
training. Good for her, right?
Yeah.
But everyone starts someplace low.
And
right?
some
Like-
people are just always going to be lower too. Like you may not be, I won't have as high of an FTP as Chad has. Like it's just actually, who knows?
Don't put yourself down.
I won't be able to match his PRs, I guess, in terms of like what you were at. So darn near 4.
way back when, yeah.
Yeah, darn near
when you
400.
were older than he was. So
Yeah,
who knows?
exactly.
That's
yeah,
true.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying too, like, I remember on Slow Twitch, which was a triathlon forum back in the day, it seems like everyone had a 400 watt FTP, right? Because the people who have the biggest FTP, like for some reason, it gets shared around more.
Yeah, of
So
course.
it seems like everyone in the world has this gigantic FTP and is super strong.
Nobody wants to talk about a non 400 watt
Right, exactly.
FTP.
Yeah,
Exactly
where
right.
the majority of people are actually like at 230, 40, and they're like 150,
True
160
story.
pounds, and
Or a more,
or right, like that's and that's after being trained, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So if you're in that situation where your recovery valleys feel too high and you feel like the fitness is a problem, don't worry about it. It's okay. And hopefully that gives you some guidelines to help it get better.
CEO hat too. When we measure things at TrainerRoad, when we measure them, we don't care so you say we want to improve this metric. It doesn't matter where you start, just that you improve it.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
So there's one called Net Promoter Score, how likely someone is to share your product. And it's just all you got to do is take it and drive it up. So same with FTP.
Yep.
Don't have ego in it.
Perfect.
This is what it is.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to drive it up.
That's it.
Yep.
Don't
We're not
worry
looking
about
for
it.
big FTPs. We're looking for improved FTPs.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Performance gains in the end. Chad, once again, you can just ask us. He says, this is my first off season with structured training and power metering, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on important data fields and Connect IQ apps to have in our Garmin's on our various profiles, indoor, tour, race, century, that sort of thing. Previously, I'd paid attention to cadence above all and kept track of heart rate zones, and now he mentioned that he's into power. He's using power now. He says, but which fields are most important once I'm used to pacing and training with power? And are there any notable IQ apps? And Connect IQ, for those that don't know, is basically like Garmin's operating system for their head units to replace some of the default fields. And I'm riding next season with a power measurement on the bike. First, just covering Connect IQ. I don't have any apps that I use like that for when I'm riding on the bike or anything, because I think that this is going to come up here. I think that we all kind of follow a less is more approach with our data fields, right?
I do feel though that somebody could make a Connect IQ app where I'm like, oh, this is like
exactly.
the one I want to see. So I'm actually not familiar with the whole library, so I can't comment on it. And I think none of us are super familiar with the library.
No, I've looked through it a few times, but it's actually been some time now. So, but less is more, I guess, is one thing that even if somebody made that app,
Yes and no. I mean, there are some types of rides, especially training rides, indoor rides, long, slow rides, where I want to display as much data as I can see. If I've got room for 12 fields, I'll have 12 fields on the screen.
Cool.
But that's when I've got time to process that information. When it comes to racing and I can barely look at my headpiece, let alone make sense of what's on it, I want 2, maybe 3 fields, as little as possible.
And it depends on the intensity, right?
Absolutely.
So even if you're training
Yep.
and you're doing VO2 max intervals, you don't want to look at 12 fields while you're doing it.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I can't look at much when I'm working that hard.
I think that one thing is I try to use because I have a temptation to put on more fields than I need. I'm sure we all feel that way because we think, oh, cadence, I could use that. Or we think temperature of day, or temperature right now, that could be important if I'm riding in the winter, and then we use it all summer, right? Like it's like, there are little things that we might include where we may not need to. And what I use is kind of like my rule is if this data will affect performance positively, then I'll include it. But once again, that's within reason because you could probably justify that case for anything if you tried hard enough, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But I try to use that to keep myself honest and keep it simple because I do find that the data can be extremely valuable in a race situation, especially,
Sure.
Or in a training
Also be pretty
situation.
distracting.
And exactly right. I guess.
Have you guys ever looked at your Garmin and then either off-road or in a race have been like, looked up and
yeah.
oh shoot,
Yeah.
almost had a bad thing happen.
Yes.
In every type of race, I've done that.
Yep.
So that's
Totally
another
happens.
takeaway with kind of not looking at these things.
I think we all agree that you should. So we all have power present pretty much on every page, right? All of us.
Always. That's the one metric. If I were to just display one, that'd be it.
Yeah, and that's current power, I should say. Yeah.
And I have I pretty much do 2 pages. So I don't do multiple. Well, I guess I do have 3 pages.
Yeah.
We'll get into it.
Yeah. So when you have that current power on there, smooth that power. I think that's something that we can all agree on.
Yep.
You may smooth it more than others. I usually have 3-second smoothing. You might want to do 5-second. You might want to do more. I've heard of people doing 30-second smoothing and something really long. And I feel like if you have average power, then that's kind of bleeding into average power.
I don't know. The only reason I would smooth it over that long of a duration were if I were concerned with memory. And that's not really an issue these days.
That's smart recording. So that smoothing won't have any. Smoothing is just if you smooth your power output on one of these fields, it's just the display.
Yep.
Inside of a Garmin, you can do smart recording, which you don't really need anymore with the new Garmins.
Yep.
You just want to record every second.
Yeah, exactly.
How far you smooth, I think it's dependent on your power meter. Yep. I've run a whole bunch of different power meters, and on my stages inside, I like 7 seconds.
Yeah, you need more smoothing on that one.
Yep. Mm-hmm. With a power tap, you actually need a little bit less smoothing. And you can just play with it until you find what you like, until you aren't driving yourself mad.
I found 3 seconds to be perfect with my Cork.
I think I use 3 seconds on a Cork too.
Yep.
I do too.
Yeah. It's and that's across the board with all this stuff. When we get into average, and we're going to lay down basically what we would consider ideals, and we'll debate them too for different types of racing. But the one thing is another rule of thumb, so to speak, if it's a variable effort and versus a constant effort. So variable would be like a criterium cyclocross or a cross-country mountain bike that's like an Olympic race rather than cross-country Olympic rather than cross-country marathon. If it's more variable, then it's probably a greater chance to be looking at normalized power instead of average power if you have to pick between the two. If it's a more consistent effort, then perhaps average power is a better thing to look at, right? Mm-hmm. So I guess that covers the rules of thumb.
Or if you want it to be a really consistent effort, you could set the 2 side by side.
Mm-hmm. And you can check them out if you want to see that. Now let's get into basically, we'll talk about the bare bones and then what we would do. So let's talk about variable short races. So ones like cyclocross races, sprints, or sprint triathlons, criteriums, cross-country Olympic.
Well, a sprint tri isn't a variable race.
That's true, right? It could be depending
short,
on the course,
high
but
intensity,
in most
but
cases
not
it's not going to be.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So I would take that one. We'll move that one to more like 40K.
So 3-second power, we can all agree, or I should say smooth current power, whatever it is, your current power.
I would argue in cyclocross and crits, you almost just need your time.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to be distance based. So I would take no distance, right? Because you really don't need distance in there. That's just an extra field.
Yeah, in most cases it's going to be time. Same with cross-country Olympic racing. It's you race usually for time.
And then unless you're on a break, like in a crit, it's gonna be dangerous to look down at your head unit too much.
Could be, but so I have that power on there, my current power output for that very situation, because there's not a single crit that I'm in that I don't try to go for something. Yeah. And in that situation, I do like to see where my power's at if it's a breakaway. It'd
be really helpful.
Yep, and it's not as if I'm looking down at that and I'm governing my effort the whole time in the race. It's just if you're off the front, you're really excited in a criterium.
I think it kind of comes down to a matter of fitness. I mean, if you're the sort of guy who just wants to go out there and survive, time is pretty much all I display. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to go out there and animate the race, it's really helpful to see how hard you're pushing when.
Yeah, and it's easy to get overexcited. When you make that move in a criterium and you're like 500 watts feels like 200 right now. And then after a while, it's, oh boy, it doesn't feel like that.
And I'm not saying don't put it on there, but just when you're in the pack, don't look, please.
Yes. Yeah, it's a great point.
That goes for any metric or any.
There's no point in looking at it then.
In the pack, right? Mm-hmm. No point at all.
There's no point in looking at your head unit, period, at that point, really.
Exactly right.
So yeah. Now, with that elapsed time, we said that's something that you want to keep track of.
In short races like that, everybody's watching the clock.
You brought up speed to help with going through corners. I thought that was interesting. I hadn't thought of that.
It works in terms of breakaways. So if you're trading turns and you want to keep the speed pretty steady, that's a useful application of current speed. But I like it for corners. I mean, if I'm the type of rider who's going to approach the corners aggressively, maybe be the first one into the corner, it's really helpful to know how fast you can take that corner. Because I've seen plenty of guys who take a corner, 3 or 4 back in the pace line, no problems. But when it's your turn to decide how much speed to carry into that turn, it's really easy to blow it.
Yeah, it can be.
And that's goes back to the other point Jonathan said, is that if you are 3 or 4 back, don't look down at your head unit before the
just roll through, man.
It doesn't matter. You just hold the wheel in front of you. So you don't need to.
Exactly right. Something with this, before we go any further, something that you can remember that can be a big help. You don't have to have all these data fields here because you can analyze it in post.
Exactly.
Just saying.
Yeah.
So
That's
a lot of the time you'll put all this stuff on because you feel like you need that data point, but you forget the fact that it's all recorded anyway and you're going to see it in post. So normalized power for something short and variable like this I find to be helpful. It's more representative of it. That said, if you aren't aware of, for example, your limits, how long you can sustain a normalized power of blank usually, then that doesn't necessarily prove really
But if that's normalized power over the course of the race, I don't think that's very useful information.
It depends, right? It depends. So for me, in a lot of cases, like I know where on normalized power I can sustain for a race, right? And that's, you could use average power for that very thing too, but the fact that you're coasting and everything else during a criterium can make things a little tricky to read from average power alone. So in this case, I like normalized power, but that's basically to give myself, like, for example, I'm thinking of a race last year where on the 3rd lap we got into a break, right? And on the 3rd lap we got into the break, I was feeling good and I felt like I was riding, but I felt like it was something that I've never been able to sustain something like this before. Looked at normalized power. Fact was I couldn't. So I made the poles a little easier and I quit taking as many hero poles and everything else, and we were able to make it stick. Maybe I would have figured that out anyway, but at the same time, I feel like normalized power educated me in that moment because I thought, I know that I can't sustain this type of effort for the duration of the race. So, it can be helpful, but definitely not a necessary thing. And then you mentioned also auto-lapping, you could use lap times.
Yeah, I've never actually used it. This is theoretical. I would like to know how fast the laps are. If they're escalating, if I were to get away on my own, what sort of lap time was I holding? Can I make that happen again? Why did that lap hurt so much? Oh, that was 10 seconds faster than the last lap. Why is the pace slowing? The last 3 laps have been slower than usual. Something's going to happen. I think there is good information to be derived from it. I've never used it, though.
Yeah, you can use an auto lap feature in Garmin so that it uses like a GPS point as a reset, basically.
I never knew that.
Yeah, so you can like set, like, this is the spot where I want the lap to be, and then you can come around and bink and it resets.
Yeah.
Pretty sweet.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, pretty handy tool. So
I feel like I should have known that.
Me too.
let's go into the more sustained efforts, like mid-length races too. So we're talking like, more sustained TTs, 20 to 40K TTs, an Olympic tri event, maybe a sprint tri, something like that.
And I would argue that these same fields would work for Ironman, half Ironman.
Totally could. Yeah. There may be some other ones that you want to consider with the Ironman ones, which we'll go into. But we mentioned elapsed time still could be important, especially if like a
Power
40K
and time,
TT.
pretty much staples.
Yeah.
Yeah. And 40K TTs, that's really helpful a lot of the time because you're usually shooting for something around an hour mark. So it can be a good reference point for you. Average speed. And this is something that's you can either just look at your speed in that moment and try to keep it on track, or you can use average speed. What do you guys feel?
I use average speed because I know that if I'm chasing a particular time, my average speed has to be this mathematically to make that time.
And in triathlons, for me, I'm always chasing a power target, and the speed is it's the outcome from that power.
Right.
And then I want to look at current speed because I'll be too, like on a hill climb or something. I'll be tucked in, and then I sit up for the same power. If my speed drops down a whole bunch, then I'm like, oh, I should tuck in again. Yeah, and even I'll like, as I'm going, I'll like kind of turtle my head a little bit. And if it goes 0.5 up, I'm like, cool, this is my own little wind tunnel.
In there.
Yeah.
And it might not, a gust of wind from behind me might have happened, but it gives me something to do too on the long triathlons. Distance can be another handy one for you too, especially I'm thinking like in a triathlon. In a 40K TT, you kind of, perhaps it's not as useful because you're just looking at the time and your goal and everything else.
Yeah, but I like to see how that relates to how much time I have left.
Yep, totally can.
When you're in a triathlon, this is what goes through your head. Beginning of the swim, you're like, I swam so much, it's going to be awesome. At the end of the swim, you start thinking, I'm not a swimmer, but I am a biker, so I can't wait till the bike starts.
Yeah.
And at the end of the bike, you said, you know what, I'm really a runner. Like, this bike is not so good. So you look at your distance, you're like, I'm almost done, but I'm really going to do the run.
Right.
And at the end of the run, you're like, why do I do this?
Right.
And afterwards, you're like, this is so much fun. I'm going to sign up next time. Spend $800.
The emotional roller coaster.
Yeah.
So what about variable longer races? So like road races or cross-country marathon events, or like I'm thinking like the epic rides type of races where it's a little bit more consistent.
The longer stuff, I think we start seeing, especially kilojoules start to figure into it. If you're going to monitor your nutrition, if you're going to base your nutrition on your energy output.
I think it's the opposite of where I know how much I can take in. And I already have a plan ahead of time, especially in triathlons.
No, that's the better way to go about it. I think so.
Where and two, because in training, like your KJs on the day aren't going to change very much from like when you train.
Yeah, and KJs on a screen don't tell you exactly what you're burning in terms of fuel too. So what's coming from fat, what's coming from nutrition that's already on board, what's coming from the nutrition you're taking in, et cetera. So that's a good argument.
You've assumed that you have a plan, but the fact is the majority of people that go through situations like this, they may not have this plan that's in place. And kilojoules can be an awesome way for them to remind themselves when to eat. I see a lot of people do it just on time, but the tricky thing with that is maybe you've been sitting in for a long time versus maybe it's been really hard to work or hard working. So using kilojoules as a reminder, because I know that I forget to eat and I don't want to eat as often as I should.
Perhaps as a reminder, yeah.
And it can be a helpful thing.
You can set your Garmin to remind you too, to eat and drink.
Exactly right.
And the KJs,
and you can set it off of kilojoules, which would be more accurate than setting it off of just purely time.
You don't want to also like, you don't want to eat exactly like replace how many kilojoules you burn.
No.
So if anyone looks at that and they're like, oh, I rode 1,200, I did 1,200 kilojoules.
Better get to eat
1,200 kilojoules.
No. But at least it's a more accurate indication of just pure time, I guess, is a good thing to help people with. Chad, you mentioned grade is something that you like to have.
I like grade. For road races, it include large or long climbs, and especially if they undulate, because there are times when I try to stay with people who are smaller in stature, better strength to weight, and if the grade reaches a certain point, I've kind of done myself in trying to hang on to something that was unrealistic. It just happens at the 8% point. This has worked for me in the past, probably would still work for me now if I race these races. Once the grade tips upward of 8% and the smaller riders move ahead, trying to stay with them is a bad idea. And I know I could base that on power,
that's good.
But I like looking at the grade too.
Could this be a self-limiter?
Very well could.
At 8%,
self-limiter?
up?
No, based on history. It wasn't something I went into, I think I crack at 8%. No, I crack at 8% when I try to hold with Chris Phipps and these smaller riders who start riding away from me.
Bring up a good point, Nate.
I know, both of us.
Are you playing head games?
Well, no, I'm just, Jonathan and I are looking at each other on the live broadcast.
See how that goes.
I don't. Yeah, I could see with power, if you're doing 800 watts, you're like, you look down, you go, I can't sustain this.
It's not as soon as I see 8%, I check out, but I do, that is one thing that figures into my tactics from that point forward. Here's
one thing that I could see with that. I think a lot of people get down on themselves no matter what their power says when somebody pulls away from them, or when a pack pulls away. And a lot of the time you can get into a situation where you're being excessively hard on yourself. And maybe this is an opposite situation where you can go, okay, it's not just that I'm slow right now and they're just dropping me because I'm slow, but the odds are in their favor for right now. That's fine. I'll get them back, and I need to be patient right now. So it's not necessarily as much as an excuse as an informing metric in that respect. I can see that.
Not really about excuses. This is because it's happened enough times for me to take it seriously.
For power to weight ratio, let's say Jonathan and I have 4 watts power to weight ratio, both of us, exactly. And you can go into, there's like a website, you can do Best Bike Split, or there's like a cycling analytics website. And you can put in our different body weights and the different power. And at one, I forget what the grade is, maybe it's 6% or something, we're going the same speed. But as it tips up, even though we're the same power to weight ratio, you will actually, Jonathan, be going faster. And you can go to like 10, 12%, and Jonathan will be going faster at the same power to weight ratio as I will.
You're making my case.
Well,
I mean, I could use power to do the same thing, and I could just gut it out and see how things go.
Or I might just have a higher power to weight than Jonathan, or he might be 2 seconds from giving up.
I can see Chad's reasoning. I
can see his reasoning.
I don't want to use it, but I see Chad's reasoning.
I know. I understand where you're coming from, Chad.
And I like the grades too. I like to see what the grade is. I like to understand why it hurts so bad right now for 6 miles an hour.
It's a good point. Well, caveat with that. My Garmin has been very, very wrong on grade many times in the moment, especially if you're riding in like cloudy, rainy weather, because they use barometric pressure to actually sense elevation a lot of the time. So I remember riding through like clouds and rain in the Sierra, and we ended up, I think it was only climbing about 800 feet, and we had climbed much closer to about 12,000 feet. So it's a situation where that can be misleading a bit.
Allow common sense to figure into the situation.
Yep. Current speed, especially like circuit races or lap races, that could be something that you want to look at. That said, I know a lot of people quantify like a race like it was so hard because you're going 24 miles an hour. I never use speed for that purpose right there. So distance can be helpful if it's unfamiliar terrain. I've found especially like if you're dealing with like, I'm thinking of epic rides, like what we did there, you have aid stations. You want to know where those aid stations are, and they usually indicate those.
When it's over.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was hot. But usually you indicate those, or they indicate them, the race organizers, at distance markers. So that's a good way to do that.
Distance with cue sheets are amazing. That's
Extremely helpful.
Yeah, Jonathan.
That's last season's revelation.
Yeah, Jonathan printed them out and we taped them to our top tubes.
Yeah.
And knowing that you have 3 more miles to go to one is awesome.
Yeah.
People have asked like what program was used for that. It's just like standard stuff. If somebody wants to make like a website, like a widget that basically like you put these things in, I think it'd be really helpful. A lot of people would like that. So,
you can use different pages. And what I do is I have like a 3-second normalized power, time, and distance. That's pretty much, I can use that for all races.
Yeah.
And then I switch to another page, and that has my TSS, my kilojoules, my time of day, my temperature, and all that kind of stuff. And that's where I use that in training, where I'm just kind of like, I've just done something, there's no one by me. I can flip through all the pages and look at that and kind of like look at the data. But I like it real simple.
yep,
while
I keep
race.
it.
That's exactly how I do it.
Yep, I keep
2
it
screens.
watered down.
3.
Just keeping it basic.
All the data and then minimal data.
Yep. And a pro tip with your head units, a lot of the time you can set up your head unit to have like specific ride profiles if you feel like you want to have one that's different. So you can have like mountain biking or
Indoor training.
time trialing or whatever else you want. Indoor training, you got TrainerRoad for that.
Or the head unit chat.
Well, I look at my head unit too.
So the last thing I want to cover is Wahoo has on their head unit like little like lights that light up and they change color as they go up. And I've seen people use this for different things. I was talking to Pete Morris. He's from Cliff Bar and TrainerRoad employee.
Yeah, we just hired him.
Product manager.
Yeah, he's a product manager of the app. So
We made him our own.
Yep, he is now part of he's raised our average watt per our FTP up.
Yes, he
and
has.
watt per kg. Both.
Yeah. Welcome to the team, Pete. I was talking to him. He has a Wahoo head unit, and I believe that he has his on there like representing heart rate or speed, perhaps. I have mine representing. You can set it to represent percentage of threshold. So basically, like once it gets to, I think it's orange, then you've hit your threshold, and then if it's red, it's over type of a thing. But it builds up. It really does not guide my efforts. And if I'm honest, there's not a lot of value you get from it. I'm just trying to use the Christmas tree lights that are on the thing. So if those are there, though, I've found that the one thing that's beneficial with that is if you are in a situation where you can't look down at your head unit, but you need to know roughly where you're at, those lights are very easy to catch out of your periphery.
Kind of cool.
And you can see roughly where you're at. So that kind of lets you know, okay, I'm at threshold right now, and I don't have to look down and see it.
The dashboard engineer, I used to build dashboards before TrainerRoad, would say, as I wanted as an exception thing. So if I was a triathlete, I would have it. I wanted to light up orange and red when I'm way too high in power, because I know in this this Ironman, I should never be above 280 watts.
Yep.
So then I want it to light up, and then shoot, I got to back off my effort, or else it's going to hurt me 3 hours from now.
Exactly. Ian, he says, if I miss a session or two due to weather or life, am I best to forget it and stay on track with the program, or try and find a space to slot it in? Either a double session or one day, or use a recovery day to fill in that missed workout. I appreciate that a double session will alter the week's TSS score, by the way. Thanks for the program and podcast, guys. All a great help with the knowledge.
Yeah, we've addressed this question numerous times, and that you prioritize your quality workouts and skip the rest when necessary. We chose this question because he mentions a couple of things that I really want to steer people away from. A double session in one day, it can be okay if that second session is like a depleted ride where you're going to go low intensity and you have specific aerobic benefit aims going along with it. However, if you're talking about doing 2 interval sessions in the same day. The same thing goes with skipping a recovery day in lieu of doing another high intensity day. Just understand what you're doing. The stress adapt scenario where you stress the system and then you rest it and allow it to adapt such that you super compensate and come back stronger and ready to do more work is interrupted. So it's certainly interrupted if you do another workout later in the same day. And of course, it's interrupted if you forego a recovery day to do another high intensity workout. So just consider how you're interrupting that cycle. You're not allowing, you're not allowing your body to adapt to the stress that you inflicted the first time, and you're going to heap more stress on top of it, and you expect to get faster from that. It's not logical. It's not to say you can't do that occasionally if you're looking for a higher dose of stress, like a 2-day block, and then you're going to recover for a couple days. So kind of a concentrated block and then a concentrated block of recovery. That's okay. That's not what we're talking about here, though. So just recognize that you're kind of missing the point of what you're after. You're trying to get faster, but you're interrupting your body's process of doing exactly that.
Could they too, if let's say they had Tuesday, Thursday, because of life, they know I can only work out Wednesday. I can't do 2 of them.
Yeah.
Could I just do the +1, +2, +3 versions of one of those workouts? A little bit harder because I know I'm going to have an extra.
You could. I mean, you could up the volume as long as the intensity is in line with what you've been doing.
Yeah.
That's
yeah,
sure.
So instead of 2 work, because I'm going to have a little extra rest, right? That's
why not? So heap more on one of those workouts, but still prioritize your recovery following it.
And in that kind of block, I would have that be, if you could make that on Tuesday, that'd be better than Thursday, because if you do it on Thursday, you're closer to then Saturday's workout.
Ideally.
Ideal in an ideal world. But it obviously ideal doesn't always happen.
Yeah, that's the truth. I think that the importance of prioritizing which workouts you skip or which ones you stick to is something that's super important.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, it's, for example, like I'm going to miss my 40-minute easy workout that's going to be at 40% FTP today, something like that.
Yeah, and that's, I'd like to think that's a no-brainer, and we've certainly covered it enough that I think anyone who listens to this podcast is well aware of.
Yep. So the more the work that's more specific to the type of racing you're going to do, that sort of thing.
The higher quality stuff.
That's what you want to make sure that if you're going to miss one, try not to miss those, right? If you're in a situation where you can pick and choose. Something to keep in mind with double days, I'm thinking back to my ski racing days when we used to do double days with dry land training. So, and it was hard training. And that was basically dry land training equaled impending sickness. And, back then I just thought it's fall and, I'm at school, so I'm around everybody else that's sick and everything else.
Yeah,
but it always coincided. And really, I think that in this case, I was getting worked too hard back then this day.
Probably. There is an argument. High-level athletes do need those double days. They need to do one type of workout early in the day, another type of workout in the later part of the day. I mean, these are guys and gals who are working out 10, 14 times a week.
Yeah.
They have to double up, and they do it pretty consistently.
Yeah.
But the types of work is different. The recovery is still absolutely prioritized.
Yeah, and in this case, I can't say that recovery was prioritized at all as a high school ski racer, and it was a good opportunity for me to run myself down. So when you do it, once again, just be sensible. Make sure that you're keeping that eye on recovery. So.
My last double days I used to do, high school marching band.
There we are. Yeah,
those were tiring.
Double days is a high school thing. It seems.
No idea.
Rob has a power meter calibration question. He says, in training, I calibrate my power meter about 20 minutes into the ride. No worries, works well, easy to do. The problem is in a triathlon race, obviously I'm not wanting to ease up and calibrate 20 minutes into the bike leg. How do you suggest we work around this? And just to let you guys know, we went straight to the source and talked to the engineers at Quark on this one, so we have some good insight. But his first question, he says, assuming the weather conditions are likely to be the same as the day before the race, do you calibrate at the same time the bike portion of the race will be on and then leave it? We asked them, and they said this isn't necessarily a terrible idea, but something that's really interesting is the fact that, so actually, Nate, you talked about calibration versus zeroing.
Yep.
They're two different things, right?
Yep.
Do you want to explain really quick, just once again, what those are?
Zeroing is like you get on your bathroom scale, you push a button, and it makes it so that it pretty much tells the system there's no weight on the system right now. Yep. Calibration is you have to hang a weight or send it to the manufacturer. It's this long process, and that actually adjusts the slope of how much torque is on it to be able to get the actual power meters. So you're usually just zeroing it, but everyone calls it calibrating it.
Yep, they're used interchangeably. So I asked cork, I asked them if when you're doing a zero calibration, is it taking temperature into consideration? And they said, we actually have a temperature sensor, a thermometer within our power meters, and it's measuring multiple times a second actually, and it's constantly updating that. And then they basically have firmware installed on there that says, when it measures this, you need to account for it by adjusting things by this much. And I think that he said they have something like all the way from like, it's like way far below zero all the way up to like a 200 degrees nearly. So like they really have it, all their bases covered with that. So when you're doing that zero calibration, it's not taking into account the temperature necessarily. Sure, it looks at that and everything else.
Not on a cork.
Yeah, not on a cork. What it's looking, and in most cases, they assume that that's probably the case with most good power meters across the board.
Makes sense.
They said that what it's actually doing is just like what you said, Nate. It's just zeroing the scale. That's it. It's not taking into account temperature. That should be taken into account constantly as you're actually riding. So I always thought, I was like, it's taking into account temperature. So, my garage is really cold today versus hot today, so I should do it because the temperature changed. You should just do a zero calibration because it's easy and you might as well do it right then. I think that there's a confusion point with power meters and smart trainers here. A lot of people talk about doing a spin down calibration on their smart trainer, and you want to do that when that's warmed up. But with a power meter, once again, since the temperature is always being taken into account, you don't have to reset that power meter or do a zero once it's warmed up or cooled down.
So in his case, you could just do it before the race starts and not have to worry about it getting all wacky on you.
Yep.
In the olden days with like the first SRMs and maybe even the first corks, I'm not sure though, I don't speak out of turn on that, but it used to be you would climb a big mountain and it would be 20 degree temperature from the base to the top, and you would have to like re-zero it.
Yep.
And then that would then because it didn't take into account temperature.
Yep.
And now all modern power meters have a temperature sensor on it. And even, I think that just happened recently. So if you do buy a new power meter, look at that to see if they have a temperature sensor.
Yeah. Something you can do too is on a cork, you can backpedal 5 times. It's 5 times. And if you backpedal 5 times, it uses all the data across how long it took to backpedal 5 times, and it sees that as a zero calibration. That said, it sounds like the method they prefer, if you do a zero calibration, is to drop, and you're not backpedaling, and you're just still on the bike, put the drive side crank arm to 6 o'clock and then do your zero calibration. And they said that's the best way to get the most precise and perfect readings, they say. So, but the calibration can work. And, we were thinking about this during a full distance bike leg. You might have time to backpedal 5 times.
Yeah, even if this were an issue and you had to calibrate mid ride or zero, is that 20 seconds really going to be pivotal?
Going downhill, for example.
Yeah, you can work it in there somewhere.
Yeah.
With backpedaling.
I'd bet.
With backpedaling.
Don't unclip going downhill.
Don't unclip going downhill and balance and try to use your head unit.
And your bike's moving, so there'll be like some kind of force
there will be
exerted on the crank.
Yeah,
So
you wouldn't just do a pedals off or a feet off calibration. It'd be a back pedal deal. So that's what I would recommend. Hopefully that sheds some light on how that works with some power meters. So I learned something from the cork guys. It's pretty cool. And I assume that if you talk to the power meter company that you're considering buying, I'm sure that they would be happy to walk you through the stuff that they do for calibrations. So you can figure all that out. Matt says, on a previous podcast, Nate mentioned that he would bring a recovery drink with him to start drinking it on his way home to get his recovery nutrition in during the prime window or recovery nutrition uptake.
I did not actually do that. I just had the question in my brain.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. I had always assumed that the window, and he uses window in quotes here, started about when I got off my bike, even if the intensity at the end was pretty low. So this is a good point. Basically, like, let's say you do a hard workout, and then does that window start after the hard intervals are done, or does it start when you're done cooling down? He says, is there any data showing what triggers the start of this window, like falling below a certain heart rate or training zone? I moved a little farther from the hills a couple years ago, so I often have a 20 to 30 minute ride home after harder efforts that usually falls in the 60 to 70% FTP range, depending on how cooked I am from the hills. Am I missing this recovery window?
And the question that I had was, I had a 20-minute descent of no pedaling.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How does my body know?
Yeah, so I guess you could look at it as a window, but the window's a big one and it closes gradually. So it's not like something that's open and then it's shut and then you're screwed. So when we work out, we're we're not really utilizing insulin, but when we're done, so we've glycogen depleted the cells. We've run them down to a low point, and the higher the intensity or the longer the duration, the more severe that can be. Body's really smart about that, and it pays particular attention to it. It has a higher insulin receptivity, so our cells are hungrier to uptake in incoming glucose and make new glycogen and restock those muscle cells. So that sensitivity is heightened when we're done, especially after a high intensity sort of effort, less so with lower intensity work. And then it just closes over time. It's not like it's there and it's gone, like I said before. So yeah, it's quicker on the uptake, that those cells replenish more quickly when you do it closer to the workout, assuming you can stomach food at that point. But it's not to say you can't replenish those stores over the course of a day if for whatever reason you miss that quote unquote window.
We as humans are very good at turning our body or perceiving our body as a system of light switches.
Yeah, it's
like basically it's on or it's off.
Zone
right?
2, zone 3, zone 4.
Yeah, exactly.
It switches.
We talked about the fat burning zone and the myth behind that a couple episodes ago. And in this case, I think that this is another good example. I had heard that it was like this 15-minute window. You got to hit that thing.
Yeah, so that's when your sensitivity to this uptake is heightened. And if maybe you have a second workout you're doing that day, and this is of crucial importance to restock those so for that second workout, and be it known, and they're not going to fully replenish in that time. It's not even going to happen necessarily in 24 hours, depending on the severity of the workout. But you can prioritize it based on what's coming next. But really, if you're not doing anything, maybe you have a rest day the next day. It's just not as great a concern as people make it.
Yeah, it's really the double days for triathletes, basically.
Yeah.
And I've gone back and forth with recovery shakes.
Yeah.
I haven't really noticed a big difference between either one. What about you guys?
Either have I, honestly.
No, never.
I've never noticed it.
Over decades of training, never.
I think that the importance with this is look at that, and I still eat, I should say. Like, we're still eating, we're getting in good nutrition after the workout. So it's not like we're starving ourselves versus that. Because if you do that, then you'll probably see a difference. But I've never seen it over time deliver any type of a consistent result. It's very important that you look at like not just one day to another, because there could be so many variables. But if you're looking at trying to weed that out.
But you guys too are doing it like you're not doing a lot of double days like these triathletes, or even they'll do 3 workouts in a day.
Yeah.
Where I would think that is like you have in your 24 hours, you have plenty of time to replenish a lot of glycogen.
No, it's a much bigger concern if you're going to repeat workouts in the same day, in the same 24-hour period or narrow range of time.
If you're strength training in the morning or something, and then you're doing training later on, or vice versa, that could be another example of maybe you want to do something like that. I know a lot of pro athletes will be doing that pretty regularly. So, dispelling another myth. Good stuff. So that'll do it for the questions that we'll handle here. If you're with us on Facebook Live, stick with us. We'll go through the questions that you put in, and we'll address as many as we can in the next 15 minutes or so. If you're joining us just through the podcast, thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you all next week. Have a good one, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Audio sounds better this time.
Good.
Oh, good.
Is the video better, hopefully? I'm just now opening it up. It looks like it's still going, so that's a good sign. Let's see.
Scott says, I'm looking to lose weight and would like to do 2 workouts a day, but my schedule makes it tricky. Could I get the same or similar benefit doing a workout late at night before going to bed and a less intense workout the next morning? Same 2 workouts in 8 to 12 hour span, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of what we were talking about with one of the scenarios where double days make sense. Mm-hmm. One of the rides is the high intensity, more depleting work, and then depending on what you eat going to bed, you may not replenish much of that. You get up in the morning, you're in a more depleted state, and then you do a lower intensity ride. And really what these are after is improvement in aerobic capabilities. They're not really aimed at weight loss, but one of the happy side effects of it is potential weight loss.
The only thing I'd worry about is doing that intense session too close to bed, because that can make
we've talked about that.
It makes it so hard to sleep
up
for me.
Cortisol. I mean, it ramps you up in a number of ways, and you can do a thorough cool down, and that will help kind of put things back where they ought to be pre-exercise levels, but it's not going to get you all the way there. So don't do it too close to bed.
I like it the other way around too, where I'd rather do the easier workout kind of later at night and then wake up and do the more intense.
It makes more sense in terms of sleep quality,
yeah,
for sure. But weight loss, not as beneficial.
Kathy asked about training camps. They are evolving, but I can't say more. Sorry, Kathy. I know we teased that a long time ago.
Yeah.
And then we had internal discussions, and we thought of a better way, but then we have to build that better way. And
it's coming.
We talked
Eventually.
We talk too much. We say too many things that get us in trouble.
We do. Matt says, guys, do I really need blood lactate testing when I train with power? You guys are the best, 5 stars. Thanks for the kind words, Matt.
No.
Well, I think all of us got it.
This is what FTP is. It's a proxy for blood lactate. I mean, that's why we do it. And it's repeatable. It's accessible by most people, especially if you have power. Well, if you have power.
Did it change any of our training when we did it last year?
Nope.
No, it was informative and I won't even say informative. It was interesting.
Confusing for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in Jonathan's case, man, if he had been working by blood lactate and thought,
I'd be like,
put hard numbers on training zones.
Yeah, if I was just doing that, I would be the slowest rider in the world. I would never be working hard.
John would be like, I don't know why everyone complains about training. It's so easy.
Exactly.
As he got fatter,
but everyone's
and slower.
really fast.
Yeah. He had a really high blood lactate.
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
usually
4 or 5 times what we had. So
yep.
Yeah,
it was weird.
Yeah, he leveled out. Most people, we leveled out pretty close to 4.5, I think.
Yeah, and I was
a little higher. You were like 9 or something ridiculous.
I was at threshold.
19.
I was at threshold at 13, and then I peaked at 22.
Yeah,
so
and I did find another
very
example
much an outlier, but
where athletes they had a World Cup skier, a slalom skier, who actually was at roughly the same level. So it's not uncommon, or it's uncommon, but it's not unheard of.
I like that how he compared himself to a World Cup skier.
Subtle padding there. That's all.
Mike asks, "Hey Jonathan, love the podcast, particularly the insights into kit, technique, and tactics. Having covered rim width and tire size on road bikes, what is your view on the trend towards wider mountain bike rims? What would be your ideal rim width tire size combo for XC racing? Do you favor different tire sizes front and back? Discuss."
Good questions, Mike. So this will change. I hope it will change with time. So internal width, ideal for XC, I think is 25 millimeters. That's a bit on the wide side for what we've seen, but I think that's probably good. And then I would look at a 2.2 to a 2.35 width tire. My theory is that 2.2 is the better choice right now, but that will change because tire tech will get better. We'll get more supportive sidewalls, better puncture protection while having lower weight tires. And as a result, a greater volume tire, as long as it weighs less within reason, I think will be better because it'll allow for lower pressures, better, I should say increased or decreased rolling resistance and better handling. So a bigger contact patch. So that's what I would recommend. And then front, it depends on the bike, I guess. On certain bikes, like on my Yeti, I'm actually running right now. I'm running a 2.35 up front and a 2.2 in the rear. It's okay. The 2.3s all around were a little, I felt like it was a bit chubby for that bike. I only had 21 millimeter internal width because they were the NVM 50s. And I felt like it was a bit chubby. So I switched and went to the just narrower rear to give that a shot because you always want to have a fatter front if you're going to have different size tires, just because that gives you more control. But I don't notice much of a difference other than the fact that my back end feels like it can skid out easier and more now. So I think that it would actually be better if I had narrow instead of mixed, because then at least you have consistent front to back, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I know BMX guys go fatter, I think, up front than in the rear, but on a mountain bike, I'm not sure it's always the best. So
John says, "Hi TR, I've been training hard for the last 6 months and was halfway through build. I've had to take 4 weeks out due to a family member being poor. Sick probably. My FTP was 323. What's the best thing to do to get back on track? Love this show."
I'd probably restart the build. Just start with an assessment and restart whatever build you were using.
I would too. 4 weeks is
you don't need to backtrack any farther than build training, but you're certainly not going to jump back in where you were, and you're not going to have that same FTP. Sorry to say, but it'll come back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Somebody's asking if they've missed 7 days in a row due to illness, and looks like they are in week 2 of mid-volume sweet spot base. Mm-hmm. What should they do since they've missed those 7 days due to sickness?
If your schedule allows it, I would go back to week 1, just restart. You probably don't need to reassess. I don't imagine your FTP has been affected. Partially, you may have experienced a bit of recovery, but your body's sick, so it probably wasn't devoting a lot of its resources to making your body stronger so much as healing it. So as you do jump back into it, you might even trim the intensity on those rides. Maybe just pay close attention to how you're feeling, and don't be afraid to add an extra day of recovery in between the harder workouts. Maybe even do just 2 of the 3 workouts if you're on low volume.
There you are. Yeah. Turn down intensity or make little adjustments as needed. But chances are, one thing I found whenever I come back from sickness, if I judge things off of that first workout, I'll be very sad and very.
Yeah. Don't.
I just try to stick with it, and I make adjustments as I need to through those first few workouts, and it'll come back.
You're sick for a week. Give yourself at least a week to come back from it.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly.
Ken says, I get conflicting messages via the on-screen prompts telling me to ride at a higher cadence, which puts me way over my power targets when I'm using a smart trainer in erg mode. When I switch to resistance mode, then it tells me to spin at an impossibly high cadence to meet the power targets. So I'm going to answer this one. What happens if you're on an erg trainer, whenever you change cadences, the erg trainer, like a smart erg trainer, it has to do it changes the resistance to try to like compensate that. Mm-hmm. So if you suddenly raise your cadence, the power is going to be higher for X amount of seconds until the trainer then adjusts for it. Mm-hmm. So you kind of have to, if you jump up to 100, you're going to have to expect a slight spike in power, and then it will kind of level off. Mm-hmm. If you're a rider who's sporadic, or the worst thing to do too on a smart trainer is if you're looking at the power and you're trying to chase to hit the power and you're going from 90 to 100 and 90, 100.
You'll be in an endless loop.
Yeah, the trainer just keep adjusting the whole time. Which is it's hard to do. So if you are doing, and I like doing non-erg mode intervals, if you're in resistance mode, one thing you have to remember, Ken, is you have to shift in that mode. So when you say you have to hit an impossibly high cadence, you'll have to then shift into a bigger gear. And if you are spinning out still, well, if you go on the device tab on that trainer, you can increase the resistance for it. Mm-hmm. So you might be at the lowest resistance, and there might not be you might be at a resistance level 0, and you can go in that trainer and you can turn it up one at a time. Mm-hmm. On my hammer with a 4210 or 42 even 11, I find that on 0 resistance mode, I can hit like 350 watts easy. Okay. So on resistance mode 1, it's pretty good.
You don't need
and
much.
It goes up to 7, right? So
yikes, yeah.
I've never moved past 2.
I know. I don't know why anyone would go up to 7, and then it's like 1,000 watts, to do anything. But it's there. I think it's kind of some of those trainers when they say like it could do this many watts, it's I think more marketing than like functional.
Yeah,
because no one's doing like a 2,200 watt sprint on a trainer, and like holding that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
People need to
touching it.
Nathaniel asks, is it ineffective to do a somewhat of a hybrid base where my midweek rides are sweet spot and weekend rides are more focused on outdoor long rides? Currently doing monitors. I watch you guys keep up the good work. No, not at all.
Nothing
in fact,
wrong with that.
If you look at the training plan, that's more or less kind of what that's what the workouts are scheduled to be, or the longer ones on the weekends that aren't as focused on the really high intensity stuff. Yeah. And
the longer, lower intensity work is just pushed to the weekends because the assumption is that people have more time to train on the weekends. But if your week is otherwise aligned otherwise, then make use of it. Yeah.
And doing them outside. I mean, it's once again, the ideal scenario is that you give yourself the best chance to hit your marks with precision with your workout, right? If that's what you're looking at. But if you have other priorities or something else that requires you to go outside, a psychological benefit of feeling flow and shredly on the trail, whatever it might be, right? Then there's value to that too. And you should consider that. But once again, if you're chasing fitness gains, the best is to always be precise.
Matthew says, I'm confused about FTP. If I'm able to maintain a higher percentage of FTP, doesn't that mean I've gained fitness and now have a higher FTP? Mm-hmm. So we're talking about maybe before he could hold 80% for, 90 minutes. Now they can hold 80% for 2.5 hours. Mm-hmm. Does that necessarily mean I have a higher FTP?
No, not necessarily. That probably means you increase your stamina. So it is another measure of fitness, another type of fitness. It just means you can sustain your FTP for longer durations. So it's not the same thing. It doesn't necessarily mean you pushed your FTP any closer to your VO2 max. It just means that you can stay there for longer. This is largely what sweet spot's about.
But it could also mean I also have a higher FTP.
It could. Right? It absolutely could. So if you suspect that, reassess.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Let's see.
Someone's riding TrainerRoad and listening to the podcast at the same time.
Heck yeah. Way to go. I like it. Oh, okay. So he says, from Shane says, how do you approach training in season using TrainerRoad with a team, group ride, and an interval or a sprint session during the week? So I see this like in race season, basically. I kind of see this as almost like how do you follow a plan in race season?
Yeah.
Something that I see a lot of people do with TrainerRoad is they'll follow, let's say, a high volume plan in the winter. And then what they might do is they start racing as they drop to a mid or a low volume plan, because I think all of us have found this when you completely drop the structure and you just let yourself ride outside and do short races and that's it on the weekends, or like, 2 races a week, but you completely get rid of the structure. I always notice that it declines. And I hear that from pretty much everybody too.
It's pretty consistent. Yeah.
So if you can even just step down to a lower volume training plan, I think it's a great way to be able to.
Yeah, just try to maintain at the very least 2 high quality days. Maybe one of those days comes on the race course, but you have to really get after it. But at least 2 hard interval sessions per week.
I have looked at my past training, indoor and outdoor, and I noticed that my FTP changes happen mostly in the spring and in the fall and the winter.
And that has nothing to do with the season or the weather, right?
Yeah. And that during the summer where I have a higher percentage of outdoor rides, I don't have those FTP changes going up. Yeah. And although in my case, you got to get out. I have to get out on the trails and improve my handling, right? So even though I might not be increasing my FTP as much, I might be a faster racer I will be a faster racer by increasing my technical skills. So it's a balancing act to increase your technical skills as a limiter for me, and to always increase your FTP. And unless your FTP is above 5 watts per kilo, and it's really, really hard to increase it, like there's usually there's room to grow.
Yeah.
Jared asks, concerning the discussion on hydro versus mag trainers, how can you put that much effort into training and racing and not just get a kicker? I see this a lot, like basically like that, like, oh, well, you're going to train, just get a kicker. And honestly, it's not like that. It doesn't make your training more effective necessarily. And I feel like, and I'm training on a set of rollers, and I could get the same quality workouts that I would on a decent mag trainer or a good fluid trainer or a smart trainer. It's you don't have to have, like, I want people to, because I feel like everybody thinks to get into indoor training they need to buy a smart trainer.
Yeah, you can use just about anything.
You don't need to, no. And I keep in mind, and this is, I have no agenda here. Like I rode a kicker and I rode smart trainers for quite some time. I personally enjoy not riding those. I personally enjoy riding a set of rollers, and I still get the same quality workout. So it's not like a thing where it's just comes down to cost either. It might just be preference. So
and with the hammer and resistance mode, it's pretty much like a fluid trainer with a really big flywheel.
Yeah.
And it's stable, and it could fit my 148 Boost mountain bike.
Yeah, without having to use adapters or anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
And so that's...
It's a nice trainer.
Yeah, compatibility might be the biggest drive, right? Like, since I want to use my mountain bike or my road bike or my cross bike, that's the appeal of rollers, or in this case, it'd be a great opportunity to get something like the hammer.
Another thing I want to talk about is when you're on a direct drive train, 2 of us here have noticed, and this could be something that you don't really, it's hard to perceive, but we both have stretched our chain on a direct drive smart trainer.
Yes.
Park Tool has a little like thing that you put into your chain, and you can like bend it down. It can show you based on what speed is like how much your chain has stretched. Mm-hmm. And I was getting some skipping and stuff. And someone here who used to work at a bike shop, he's like, yeah, I had to replace my chain because it got stretched. And I did a little Park Tool thing, and I was like way over. Like there's a little small limit, and I was like 4 times bigger than that. Yep. So I replaced the chain. I think a lot of times that's something that needs to be replaced that people don't ever.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, they assume because they're riding indoors, maybe that the wear and tear isn't quite the same.
Just in general.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they would assume, maybe like no road grime, no dust or something like that. But no, you're still putting in a lot of force to that drivetrain.
Yeah, and what can happen is you'll get skipping and stuff if your chain is stretched. And I think just in general, people will ride on 4 or 5 years on the same chain.
Oh, totally.
Oh, yes.
Right.
See it all the time.
Did Larry happen to mention how often we should replace a chain?
This was not
on a
Larry.
mileage basis? Oh.
No, this was our product manager, Brandon.
It all depends on the chain, but there's like a higher quality chain should last you longer within reason.
Sure.
That said, and it's too variable to put a specific date on there.
That makes perfect sense.
Getting a chain gauge is a good thing to do, but the one thing that I would say is when you change your chain, if you see that your chain is really stretched, chances are you should change out your chain rings and cassette too. I know that totally sounds like a drivetrain money-making scheme, but it's not the case because they wear into each other. Keep in mind that your gears were fighting against that chain, and that's what was stretching it. So over time, they both wear out, and you'll put that new chain on, and then you'll have crappy shifting or you'll have skipping again. It's because other things stretch too.
But if you stay on top of the chain, you don't. Then your
drivetrain's safe.
Exactly. You don't have to replace everything at once.
Best tip I could offer is if you can, buy 3 chains. I know that this is like super detail oriented. Buy 3 chains, get quick links for them, and then rotate your chains every week or every 2 weeks.
Oh, I'm not.
Why rotate?
Super easy.
Why rotate though? So it's always like the same kind of.
And then you aren't wearing out your drivetrain. It's handy. So then you're
new
running
chain every ride.
Yeah. Well, it's a good way. Basically, you'll end up replacing, if you just run 1 chain, you'll end up having to replace your gears once your chain stretches. But if you run 3 chains, you can go through the lifespan of 3 chains without having to change out the rest of the stuff. So it's a cost saving measure in the end. And it can help, and it's really not tough at all because once you set up one chain, you count the links, and then you have a quick link, and then all you have to do, it's like a $5 tool that you can get from Pedro's. All you have to do is, or Park Tool makes them, everyone, drop it in there, use the pliers, it clicks it off, then you just take the new one and click it on. It's like so easy.
You could also clean your chain then.
Oh yeah, it's a great opportunity. Just put it in either a sonic cleaner, or if you want to do, you can just use Simple Green or let it sit in something, and then you'll pull it out and be shiny. Yeah. I see wax them too.
They put them in people put chains in like a soda bottle and kind of shake it up then.
Water bottle.
Yeah, water bottle. One thing that people don't realize too is that when you clean your chain and it's tight tensioned on your drivetrain, that there's gunk between like the chain links, and until they're like relaxed, things don't come out.
Is there any harm to leaving your chain in something like Simple Green or a degreaser for days?
I think so.
It depends. No, I mean, it depends on the chain. Like there might be coatings on the chain, like a tinitride coating or something like that could wear off if it's susceptible to that chemical. But no, it's in fact, a lot of people leave them in like solvent baths. And they'll just leave parts there, and then they'll pull them out eventually. Yeah. So it's not necessarily bad. What I would recommend though is just making sure that you do like a diluted concentration or something like that of whatever you're using. Okay. You could even ask the chain manufacturer, even though I bet they'll tell you that it will harm it because they'll just want to play it safe. But you could even ask them, will Simple Green, for example, hurt this? And what you talked about too, it's not just the grind between the outer link arms, it's the rollers, right? Because you want the rollers and the pins to move perfectly freely. And that's where you want chain lube anyway. You lube that part, you don't lube the rest of it. So, and that when that's on tension, yes, it's stuck. So if you can get something without tension, shake it around in there, you'll be amazed at the stuff you can get out.
I want to say manufacturers say like, don't use Simple Green.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if they said that, and especially if they have a product of their own. I can see that. Steven says, not good for 11-speed chains where the quick link is a 1-use link. Yes, this can be the case. However, so 12-speed chains, just like on Eagle, just toss your quick links. They are useless. They're like paper after you take them off a lot of the time. But if you're using an 11-speed chain, KMC does make a link, I believe, and Whipperman makes a link that is, you can replace it. Or reuse it, I should say. That said, and this is just a caveat, I used a Whipperman and it snapped a chain and I went down pretty hard. So, and there was no other reason that my chain should have snapped. So, and it was just on a SRAM chain.
Yeah, I would like my approach is going to be is I'm going to use that tool, and there's like a 0.5% stretch and then like a 1% stretch, and it says once I get to the 0.5%, I could replace, like it's available to start replacing. Yep. Then I'm going to replace it then, so it doesn't stretch so much that it then messes my drivetrain. Yep. Because I'm, and the same thing that Steven's saying is, a broken chain is just like that slip of the foot. Like you go down hard, and you usually go over.
Terrible,
awful.
Yep. Terrible crashes.
Yeah.
And Shimano, I'm almost positive does have. They do say that you can reuse quick links now on their 11-speed. I want to say that it's like a very recent announcement. I don't think that Shimano's been very public about it, but I've heard this from a very good source that I trust from Shimano that said that you could reuse them. That said, read manufacturers' warranties and everything else and all their warning signs on that stuff. So yeah, that could be that case.
Jared said he's running a 5-chain rotation on his mountain bike.
Clean all 5 at once.
Dry them, put them in numbered bags. I rotate every 50 to 75 miles. Jared and Jonathan should be friends.
Wow.
That's a good idea, honestly, and it sounds like it's a lot of work, but it's not. I mean, the time to clean a chain, if you have it off your bike, is really no time at all.
Oh, that's thorough.
You just slip it in a bottle and shake it up. So All right, guys, that covers it for this week. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and we'll talk to you all. It'll be on a slightly different schedule over the next couple of weeks, just, with holidays and everything else. We're going to try to stay as consistent as possible for y'all. There will be a podcast every week, but we'll give you all fair warning. Thanks, everybody. Chat soon.
See ya.
Bye-bye.